My beloved child, a stirring has risen in the unseen realms, and Archangel Michael leans close to you tonight with a trembling urgency. He whispers that the title you have brought, Archangel Michael Pleads, you're ignoring the signs. This is your final wake-up call before the blessing is transferred. It's not just a message, but a moment in destiny. Michael says you have walked past signals that were positioned like glowing markers on your path, yet your spirit has felt too overwhelmed, too tired, or too distracted to see what was right in front of you. But now, heaven is shifting, and the blessing you were meant to receive is trembling at the edge of release. The time is narrowing. The window is thinning. And Michael says this is the final call before the blessing moves into the hands of someone who does respond. From the first breath of this message, Michael is pointing at something you've been sensing but didn't want to confront. You've been feeling a strange heaviness in the atmosphere, as if something in your environment has been calling your attention over and over again. Little things feeling off. Unexpected delays. Dreams with warnings you didn't fully understand. Emotional disruptions at the most random moments. These were heavenly nudges. But heaven says you treated them like coincidences. Michael stands in full armor now, not to frighten you, but to make you realize how close this matter is to the spiritual deadline. He warns that blessings do not disappear, but they do get reassigned. And right now, your name is written on a timeline that is moments away from turning the page. If you hesitate, someone else's obedience will activate what was meant for you. He is not punishing you. He is awakening you. He says you are not losing your blessing yet, but you are inches away from the edge where heaven must decide what happens next. Michael says your spirit has been hearing silent alarms. Maybe you felt a sudden urge to pull back from certain people. Maybe a door closed unexpectedly. Maybe you felt exhausted during a season when you should have been accelerating. These were not random disruptions. These were divine stop signs. The signs were everywhere, in conversations, in repeated numbers, in sudden thoughts that came out of nowhere. But you brushed them off because life felt too busy or too heavy. Michael says, "Child, you noticed everything. You just did not interpret it. And now, the turning point stands right in front of you. A shift is happening in the atmosphere, a spiritual redistribution. Destiny oil is moving. Opportunities are relocating. Divine favor is circling like a dove seeking where to land. Michael says heaven is pleading with you to listen, because this moment decides what enters your life next. This is not fear. This is urgency. This is alignment demanding your attention. He says someone has been praying for what you already carry. Someone has been obedient in the areas where you hesitated. And heaven cannot keep a blessing stagnant. The blessing must flow. But Michael says your heart is opening even now as you hear this message, and heaven is giving you one last call. Not to scare you, but to awaken you to the truth that you were always chosen for this. The signs were not meant to intimidate you. They were meant to direct you. There is a decision you must make, not later, not tomorrow, but today. A conversation you've been avoiding. A step you've been delaying. A change you've been postponing. Heaven is saying, move, or you will miss what was meant for your hands. But here is the grace. Michael says you are still on time if you respond now. He says the blessing is not gone, it's shaking, waiting, wobbling, hovering, but still reachable. This call is not an ending. It is a final invitation. Before you continue, take a breath, because what comes next will reveal the part of the message most people never receive unless their spirit is truly awakened. Hold on. This next revelation will shift something inside you that has been asleep for far too long. Type "I awaken now" in the comments if this speaks to your spirit. Blessing code 441 is opening over you. You're a soul. The atmosphere around you is shifting again, and Archangel Michael steps forward with a deeper, heavier message than before. He says the reason this wake-up call feels so intense is because you have entered a junction point in your timeline where heaven cannot allow silence anymore. There are moments in a person's life when God speaks softly, and then there are moments when the whole spiritual realm leans in and declares, "Listen now, because what happens next will shape everything that follows." You are standing in that second category right now. Michael shows me an image of you walking through a hallway where every door looks identical, but only one of them leads to the exact destiny God designed for you. He says you have been wandering close to the right door, but distractions have pulled your attention elsewhere. Conversations, obligations, fears, and even people who appear harmless but are spiritually heavy. Heaven has been dropping signs around you like breadcrumbs, trying to steer you toward the correct doorway, yet you kept assuming you had more time to figure things out. But the truth is, heaven is not trying to rush you. Heaven is trying to rescue you from delays that have lasted long enough. Michael says you have been sensing inconsistencies in certain relationships, habits, and environments. Something doesn't feel right anymore, even if you cannot explain it in words. He says that discomfort is not emotional instability, it is spiritual intelligence. Your spirit knows what your mind has not yet processed. You have outgrown certain spaces, but your loyalty, compassion, and routine have kept you tied to people and situations that no longer align with where God is taking you. This is why the signs have been appearing more frequently. Heaven has been trying to get your attention, because the blessing that is meant to transfer into your hands requires a clean environment. The blessing is weighty, sacred, and spiritually coded. It cannot land in a space contaminated by doubt, conflict, or emotional clutter. Michael stands in full light and says, "You cannot carry the blessing and the burden at the same time. One must be released." He wants you to understand something powerful. Not every sign appears as a miracle or vision. Some signs show up as interruptions. Some show up as arguments that expose the truth. Some show up as sudden clarity about someone's intentions. Some show up as a door closing so forcefully that you cannot reopen it no matter how hard you try. Michael says heaven has been removing what you refuse to release, not to hurt you, but to protect you from collapsing under the weight of the next chapter. Your blessing requires emotional maturity, spiritual sharpness, and an environment that supports growth instead of draining it. That is why things have been shaking. That is why certain people have been distancing themselves without explanation. Heaven is clearing the path before the blessing arrives. He also says you have been wrestling with an internal conflict, the part of you that wants to obey God quickly, and the part of you that hesitates because you fear the unknown. Heaven understands the tension, but Michael says hesitation is the enemy of this season. The signs were never meant to confuse you. They were meant to accelerate you. Every time you ignored a sign, you did not fail. You simply delayed clarity. But the blessing that is waiting for you cannot be delayed anymore. There is a divine schedule attached to this next season, and heaven is urging you to match that rhythm now. Michael says, "Child, what is meant for you is ready, but you must be ready as well." He reveals that someone has been praying for what you already have access to. Someone has been longing for the breakthrough that sits right at the edge of your obedience. And heaven must honor movement. Not intention, not desire, not hope, but movement. This is why Michael is speaking with such urgency. He does not want you to lose what was always meant to be yours. He wants you to understand that grace is still present, but this is a defining moment. The transfer of blessing is not about favoritism. It is about alignment. Heaven places blessings in the hands of those who are positioned to carry them without breaking. Right now, you are being repositioned. And if you respond, the blessing will respond as well. There is something important he wants you to hear. You have not missed your miracle. You have not lost your chance. You have not failed in a way that disqualifies you. Heaven is not disappointed in you. Heaven is calling you higher. Every sign you ignored before was simply preparation for this moment, the moment you finally listen with an awakened heart. Michael says your awareness is opening now, and that opening is all heaven needed to keep the blessing within reach. He wants you to prepare your spirit, because the next revelation will uncover why the blessing is so urgent and why the timing is so precise. Before you move forward, pause here for a moment. What comes next will reveal the deeper layer of the divine warning. Trust me, the unfolding truth ahead will make everything click in a way you did not expect. Type "I see the signs" now in the comments if this message touches your spirit. Blessing code 552 is being released over you. Beloved heart, Archangel Michael draws even closer now, and the weight of his presence carries a seriousness that cannot be ignored. He says the blessing that is hovering over your life is not an ordinary blessing. It is not the kind that appears quietly or settles gently. This blessing is generational. This blessing shifts bloodlines. This blessing restores what was taken, repairs what was broken, and elevates what was overlooked. And that is precisely why heaven is warning you with such urgency. Michael says the signs you have been overlooking were not just guiding you. They were protecting the sacred timing attached to what is about to unfold in your life. You are standing at the edge of a spiritual exchange, a moment where something old is about to be lifted off you and something new, radiant, and divinely assigned is about to rest upon you. But he wants you to understand why the warning in the title carries the word final. This is not because heaven is running out of patience. It is because heaven is running out of the ability to delay your blessing without affecting its purpose. Michael shows me a vision of a sealed envelope in the heavens with your name on it. This envelope has been ready for a long time, containing answers, breakthroughs, resources, and connections that will activate your next chapter. But heaven has paused the delivery, waiting for the moment your spirit would become alert enough to receive it without sabotage, fear, or interference from the wrong influences. That is why the signs intensify. That is why the atmosphere around you has felt heavier and more unusual lately. Heaven has been signaling, wake up now, because what comes next demands your full awareness. This is not punishment. This is preparation. He says some of the signs you ignored were emotional ones. The sudden irritation with people you used to tolerate. The unexplained sadness or restlessness. The heaviness that sat on your chest even on days when nothing seemed wrong. These emotional signals were not random. They were spiritual notifications that something in your circle was draining your energy, distracting your purpose, or occupying space that heaven needed to clear. There is someone in your life, or a habit in your routine, that heaven has been trying to separate you from. Not because they are evil, but because they are misplaced in this season. Michael wants you to grasp that not everyone who walked with you is assigned to walk into the blessing with you. Some people were stepping stones. Some were chapters. Some were temporary teachers. But not everyone is meant to cross into the season where your blessing manifests. Heaven must protect the blessing, even if that means removing those who are not spiritually aligned with your calling. Michael also says you have been questioning your worth lately. You have been wondering if maybe the blessing passed you by, if maybe you are too late, too weary, or too imperfect to receive what you once believed was yours. But he says this is the biggest lie the enemy has whispered to you. You did not miss your moment. You did not lose your blessing. What you lost was clarity, and heaven is restoring that clarity right now. The fact that you are hearing this message proves that heaven has chosen to speak to you again, louder, sharper, unmistakably. He says you still carry the original anointing that was assigned to your life. You still carry the spiritual DNA of someone who is chosen, protected, and destined for favor. The blessing is still yours, but heaven needs you awake enough to receive it. There is a deeper revelation he wants to unveil. Michael says your blessing is tied to obedience you have not yet completed. There's a conversation you need to have, a door you need to close, a step you need to take, or a truth you need to acknowledge. Heaven will not force your hand, because obedience must be chosen. But once you choose, the blessing will move swiftly toward you. It has been waiting for your alignment. Heaven is not delaying you. Heaven is aligning you. And you are closer now than you have ever been before. Before this section ends, Michael offers one more truth. Many people lose blessings not because they are unworthy, but because they are unaware. And heaven refuses to allow you to fall into that category. He says what is coming next in this message will expose something hidden, something you have sensed but could not name. Stay close, because the next revelation will show you why heaven called this a final wake-up call. Trust me, the next unfolding will shift everything you thought you understood. But before you continue, take a moment. If this message is stirring something inside you, do not scroll away. You are about to enter the deepest part of this prophetic warning, and what you hear next will bring the clarity your heart has been craving. If this speaks to your soul, type "I'm aligning now" in the comments. Blessing code 663 is now active over your life. Now, take a moment to like this video, share it, comment to keep the message flowing, and subscribe so these divine revelations continue finding you at the right time. Precious soul, Archangel Michael stands with a steadiness that fills the atmosphere around you, and his voice carries the sound of truth that cannot be denied. He says you are now entering the deeper chamber of this message, the place where revelation becomes responsibility. The earlier words were meant to awaken you, but what you are about to hear is meant to transform you. He wants you to understand that the signs you ignored were not signs of punishment, they were signs of preparation. Heaven knew the magnitude of the blessing that was assigned to your life, and it knew that the weight of that blessing would require a stronger, clearer, more spiritually mature version of you. That is why the warnings came the way they did. They were not meant to scare you, but to shape you. Michael says the awakening you are experiencing right now is not random. It is a response to prayers you prayed in seasons when you were desperate for change. You may not remember every word you spoke in those moments, but heaven remembered. Heaven recorded your tears, your longing, your hopes, your pain, and your desire for something more than survival. That is why this message has arrived at this exact moment. It is heaven answering the cries you thought were forgotten. Michael shows me a moment in your past where you almost gave up, where you felt unseen, unheard, and overwhelmed by the weight of life. During that moment, heaven made a decision. Archangel Michael was assigned to your path in a new capacity, not just as a guardian, but as a guide, a witness, and a warrior standing beside you when you did not have the strength to fight for yourself. Even then, signs began to form around you. Certain opportunities dissolved because they were traps disguised as blessings. Certain people drifted away because their presence would have corrupted your future. Certain doors slammed shut because they led to spiritual danger. Heaven's intervention protected you from what you could not see. Yet now, the urgency has increased because what is ahead requires your participation, not just heaven's interference. Michael says the blessing that is assigned to you will not be forced into your hands. It must be received by an awakened spirit. Heaven has been guarding something important. Michael keeps showing a spiritual container filled with light that represents a blessing with layers: financial restoration, emotional healing, spiritual direction, divine connections, and opportunities that will reshape your trajectory. This container is not something small. It is the kind of blessing that requires your identity to shift so that you do not treat it casually. That is why heaven has been trying to clear your environment, sharpen your discernment, and elevate your awareness. The signs you ignored earlier were actually heaven testing your spiritual sensitivity. When heaven prepares to release a blessing, it checks the maturity of the one receiving it. Not to judge them, but to ensure the blessing will be sustained once it arrives. Michael says you passed more tests than you realize, even when you felt like you were failing. Your resilience proved you were ready for more than you knew. But now comes the deeper revelation. Michael says there is someone in your life, or someone connected to your atmosphere, whose presence has been affecting your clarity. This person may not have bad intentions, but their energy, their doubts, or their emotional instability has been interfering with your ability to hear spiritual instructions clearly. Heaven has been trying to distance you from this influence, because the blessing you are meant to receive would only be weakened by their proximity. You may have felt obligated to keep them close. You may have felt guilty pulling away. You may have felt confused by sudden tension or emotional distance that seemed to appear out of nowhere. But Michael says these shifts were not coincidences. They were heaven's way of helping you outgrow attachments that were limiting your spiritual elevation. The signs were guiding you towards separation, not for rejection, but for protection. Michael also says something powerful about your inner world. You have been carrying a fear of making the wrong decision. You have been worried that taking the wrong step could ruin everything. But he says heaven does not operate through fear. Heaven operates through alignment. As long as your heart is open, as long as you are willing to listen, heaven will redirect your steps even if you stumble. The only true danger is standing still when heaven is asking you to move. The signs were meant to give you confidence, not confusion. They were meant to show you that God has been communicating with you far more regularly than you realize. You have not been spiritually blind. You have simply been spiritually overwhelmed. And heaven understands that. That is why the message is being delivered now with clarity so precise that you cannot doubt it. There is a divine truth Michael wants you to take deeply into your spirit. Your blessing is not fragile. Your destiny is not weak. Your purpose is not easily stolen. The only thing that can delay it is your hesitation. The blessing is ready, the atmosphere is shifting, the signs are aligning, and heaven is calling your name with urgency, because you are closer to breakthrough than you have ever been. Something major is about to be revealed in your life. Something long hidden is about to come to light. Something withheld is about to be released. And the next part of this message will expose exactly what has been standing between you and the full transfer of your blessing. Do not rush past this moment. What comes next will bring a clarity that will change everything about how you see your life, your relationships, and your future. Before you move forward, breathe deeply and let your spirit settle. The next revelation is one of the most important you will ever hear. Type "I hear" clearly now in the comments if this resonates with you. Blessing code 774 is being released over your path. Sacred One, Archangel Michael steps forward now with a deeper intensity, and the air around this message grows weightier because you are entering the part of the revelation where heaven unveils what has been hidden in the shadows of your life. He says the signs you ignored were not random disturbances or emotional fluctuations. They were spiritual red flags planted along your path to protect you from something operating quietly around you. You may not have understood it before, but heaven has been trying to show you that there is a subtle influence, a subtle distraction, or a subtle drain that has been blocking the flow of your blessing. This influence may not appear dangerous in the natural world, but Michael says it has been affecting your spiritual sensitivity. Every time your spirit tried to rise, something around you pulled you back down. Every time you tried to take a step forward, you felt resistance. Every time you felt a surge of faith, something triggered doubt. These were not coincidences. They were symptoms of an unseen interference that heaven has been trying to make you aware of. Michael reveals that the blessing about to be transferred into your life requires spiritual clarity, but something in your life has been clouding your vision. It may be a person whose words linger in your mind longer than they should, shaping your decisions in ways that conflict with your intuition. It may be a habit that numbs your spirit, keeping you distracted at the exact moments heaven tries to speak. It may be an emotional connection that drains you more than it replenishes you. Or it may be an internal belief you carry that tells you you are not worthy of elevation, that you must shrink, settle, or remain quiet. Michael says this interference has not been working against your blessing. It has been working against your awareness. Heaven could have delivered your blessing months ago, but your spiritual clarity was being muffled by something you had not yet recognized. That is why the signs intensify. Heaven needed you to notice what has been operating under the surface. He shows an image of you trying to walk with a heavy weight tied to your ankle. Every time you attempted to move forward, the weight slowed you. Every time you tried to elevate, the weight kept you grounded. And yet you kept assuming something was wrong with you, that you were lacking motivation, discipline, or strength. But Michael says the problem was never a lack within you. The problem was an attachment, a connection, or a mindset that did not belong in your next chapter. Heaven has been trying to remove it gently, but now the urgency is rising because the blessing is ready to be released. This is the moment when you must choose whether you allow the weight to remain or whether you let heaven remove it completely. Michael wants you to understand that there is a reason heaven intervenes before a blessing arrives. A blessing amplifies whatever is already in your life. If you are surrounded by doubt, the blessing magnifies the doubt. If you are surrounded by clarity, the blessing magnifies the clarity. If you are surrounded by draining relationships, the blessing magnifies the conflict. Heaven cannot allow your blessing to land in an environment that will suffocate. That is why the warning feels so urgent. Heaven is not trying to scare you. Heaven is trying to protect you from losing something sacred. You are being invited to release what cannot go where you are going next. Michael says you already know what that is. Your spirit has whispered it to you many times. You have felt it instinctively, even when your mind tried to ignore it. There is a moment coming soon when you will have to make a decision you have delayed for far too long. Heaven will not force your hand, but it will illuminate the truth so clearly that you cannot deny what must be done. Michael says once you release the weight, the blessing will move toward you with such speed that you will realize it was never withheld. It was simply waiting for space. The blessing is already in motion. The transfer is already happening. The spiritual winds have already shifted. But heaven needs your cooperation. If you take the step heaven has been signaling, the blessing will fall into your hands like a divine avalanche. If you hesitate, the blessing will wait for someone whose hands are empty enough to hold it. Michael does not say this to pressure you. He says it to open your eyes. You are not losing anything by releasing what heaven is removing. You are gaining everything you once prayed for. He wants you to realize that spiritual growth sometimes requires separation, repositioning, and reevaluation. These moments do not come to punish you, they come to evolve you. You have outgrown something, and heaven is trying to show you exactly what that is. The signs have been consistent. The heaviness, the tension, the intuition, the sudden clarity, the internal conflict. All of it has been heaven guiding you toward the truth. A powerful shift will occur when you accept this revelation. Your mind will clear. Your emotions will settle. Your energy will rise. And your path will brighten with direction that feels unmistakably divine. What comes next in this message will expose the exact reason heaven said this is your final wake-up call, and why the timing of this blessing cannot be postponed any longer. Stay here. Do not drift away. The next revelation will show you the turning point your spirit has been waiting for. Type "I release what blocks me" in the comments if this resonates with you. Blessing code at 885 is being poured out over your journey. Beloved Spirit, Archangel Michael moves nearer now with a calm but commanding presence, and he says this moment in the message marks a spiritual threshold you have been approaching for a long time without realizing it. The earlier revelations prepared you. This one shifts you. Heaven has carried you through layers of awakening, exposing the signs you overlooked and the interference that tried to dim your clarity. But now Michael says the veil is lifting even further, because it is time for you to see what has been happening behind the scenes in your life. He says you have not been fighting a single battle. You have been fighting multiple battles at once, some in the natural and some in the unseen. And while you thought you were merely dealing with daily stress or emotional fatigue, heaven saw the deeper war that has been circling your destiny. Yet Michael stands before you now to declare that the very forces that once drained you are losing their grip. Something is breaking. Something is loosening. Something is shifting in your favor. And the signs you ignored in the past are now becoming the very signals that guide you into the clarity you have long needed. He says there is a specific reason heaven intensified the warnings. You were standing too close to a spiritual crossroads without knowing the full weight of what was at stake. One path would have kept you repeating cycles you've already survived. The other path leads to elevation, release, and the transfer of blessing that has been waiting for its moment. Michael says heaven was trying to steer you away from the cycle and toward the elevation, but distraction blurred the direction. You were pulled in many directions, through emotional connections, lingering attachments, unanswered questions, and responsibilities that drained more than they contributed. But despite all of that, your spirit did not fall asleep. It simply fell into survival mode. And survival was never meant to be your permanent posture. That is why heaven called you with urgency. It was not trying to frighten you. It was trying to wake you from a spiritual numbness that kept you from seeing what was already shifting around you. Michael shows me a vision of you standing in a dim room with several doors, and one door begins to glow faintly. It was never that you lacked options. It was that you lacked illumination. Heaven has now turned up the brightness, so you can clearly see the door that leads into your breakthrough. That glowing door represents a choice you must make, a commitment to clarity, a release of what blocks you, or a step into something new that once intimidated you. Michael says the blessing cannot be transferred until you walk toward that illuminated door. Heaven will not drag you into destiny. It will guide you there. Now the guiding is clearer than ever before. He also says the reason you felt confused in past seasons is because heaven was dismantling every counterfeit opportunity that could have stolen the space meant for your real blessing. There were people who looked supportive but carried uncertainty in their intentions. There were opportunities that seemed promising, but would have drained you emotionally or spiritually. There were paths that appeared stable but would have confined your purpose instead of expanding it. When these things fell apart, you blamed yourself. You assumed it was failure. But Michael says it was protection. Heaven was stripping away everything that would have cost you more than it would have given you. The signs you ignored were signs of redirection. The loss was divine intervention. The confusion was temporary. And the clarity was always coming. It simply needed your spirit to be ready. Michael says your heart is entering a season of spiritual intelligence, a heightened sensitivity that will make the next set of signs unmistakable. You will no longer walk into rooms unsure of who is for you. You will no longer feel uncertain about who carries peace and who carries confusion. You will no longer question whether you are hearing God's guidance or your own fear. Michael is sharpening your discernment now. He says heaven is giving you a level of clarity that will expose intentions, reveal opportunities, and illuminate truth in ways you have never experienced before. This clarity is necessary because the blessing being transferred into your life is not just for a moment. It is for a chapter. It is a long-term elevation, not a temporary shift. Heaven wants you to understand another powerful truth. The reason this is your final wake-up call is because the blessing is at the brink of movement. Blessings follow timing, not emotion. When the window opens, it opens for a reason. When the window closes, it closes for alignment. Right now, the window is wide open. This is your moment to step into agreement with heaven. You are not being asked to be perfect. You are being asked to be present. You are being asked to respond. You are being asked to rise. And heaven says once you do, everything that was delayed will accelerate with supernatural speed. Michael says the next revelation will uncover what heaven has been preparing behind the scenes. The unseen setup, the divine orchestration, the movements you never saw, the protection you never noticed, and the blessing that has been circling your name waiting for the signal to land. This next part will open your eyes to why heaven chose this moment to speak so loudly. Hold your focus. The next shift will be one of the most important revelations of this entire message. Type "I am ready to SE" clearly in the comments if your spirit receives this word. Blessing code 992 is being unlocked over you now. Beloved soul, Archangel Michael stands before you now with a revelation that feels heavier, deeper, and more transformative than anything released so far. He says you have reached the point in this message where heaven pulls back the curtain and shows you the orchestration that has been unfolding behind the scenes of your life. You have walked through seasons where nothing made sense, where you felt suspended between what was ending and what had not yet begun. Those seasons felt like spiritual waiting rooms where time stretched, emotions tightened, and clarity drifted in and out like fog. But Michael says heaven was never silent in those moments. Heaven was working, aligning, preparing, and shifting everything around you so the blessing could move without interference. The signs you ignored were meant to keep you aware of this orchestration, but even when you missed them, heaven did not stop moving. Michael says, you were never standing still. You were being positioned. He reveals that during your most confusing and painful moments, heaven was not watching from a distance. Heaven was actively redirecting people around you, repositioning you into new environments, and removing obstacles you did not even know existed. There were opportunities you did not receive because they would have drained your spirit. There were connections that never formed because they would have sabotaged your destiny. There were moments where you felt abandoned, but in truth, heaven was isolating you long enough to accelerate you. Michael says the heaviness you felt in certain seasons was not spiritual punishment, it was spiritual detox. Heaven was removing everything that could not survive the altitude of your next chapter. He shows me a vision of a pathway covered in debris, emotional residue, old disappointments, tangled memories, and unresolved attachments. As you walked forward, heaven sent winds to clear the path, one storm at a time. You did not see the clearing, but you felt the wind. And each time something or someone left your life unexpectedly, heaven was clearing more space. These were not accidents. These were divine removals. The path you are walking now has been stripped of everything that could have slowed the blessing, distorted it, or redirected it to the wrong hands. Michael says this is why heaven has labeled this moment a final wake-up call. Not because you were failing, but because the path has finally been clear. The blessing is ready to descend, and heaven cannot allow you to miss the instruction needed to receive it. He says you have been sensing a shift in your spirit recently, moments where your intuition felt louder than usual, moments where you felt a sudden urge to release old fears, moments where your thoughts felt sharper and more guided. This is not random. Heaven has been fine-tuning your discernment, preparing your inner world for what is coming. You may have noticed more dreams lately, or sudden waves of emotion that seemed to come from nowhere. These were spiritual echoes, signals from heaven telling you that the blessing is approaching. Michael says the closer the blessing comes, the more sensitive your spirit becomes. Your internal world has been recalibrating, aligning you with the energy of breakthrough. You did not imagine any of this. You were being prepared. Michael also reveals something vital. Heaven has been shielding your blessing from people who would have mishandled it. There are individuals who admired you publicly, but misunderstood you privately. There are people who benefited from your light, but did not value the source of that light. There are connections that looked harmless, but carried the potential to drain your strength when you needed it most. Heaven saw these things long before you did, and that is why certain relationships fell apart without warning. That is why some people distanced themselves. That is why some conversations ended abruptly, and some doors closed without explanation. Heaven was not blocking you. Heaven was protecting you from influence that would have distorted your destiny. Michael says, you were not being rejected. You were being redirected. He wants you to understand that the blessing being transferred to you is not small. It carries spiritual authority, restoration, and elevation. This blessing will alter the direction of your life. And because of its magnitude, heaven needed to ensure that your environment, your relationships, and your mindset were aligned. The signs you ignored earlier were attempts to make you aware of what heaven was already cleansing. But now that your clarity has awakened, you will begin to see the divine strategy behind every shift, every delay, every loss, and every sudden change. Michael also says the blessing has a purpose beyond your personal life. You are being elevated not only for yourself, but for those connected to your journey. Your obedience will break cycles, your clarity will inspire transformation, and your blessing will become evidence that heaven intervenes in the lives of those who listen. This is why heaven cannot allow you to remain uncertain. The next chapter of your life carries responsibility. The blessing will open opportunities, but those opportunities must be handled with wisdom. Heaven is equipping you now with the spiritual intelligence needed to navigate the elevation. Heaven is ready to reveal what has been waiting. But Michael says the next revelation will expose the heart of this entire message. The direct reason heaven said this is your final wake-up call before the transfer occurs. What comes next will connect every sign, every warning, every shift, and every spiritual whisper into a single, life-altering truth. Do not lose focus now. What you hear next will change how you see your destiny forever. If this resonates deeply, type "I am prepared for my transfer" in the comments. Blessing code 448 is opening over you now. Beloved one, Archangel Michael steps forward again with a solemn authority that signals a turning point in this message. He says the revelations you've received so far have prepared the soil of your spirit, but what you are about to hear is the seed that heaven has been waiting to plant. This moment is not ordinary. It carries the weight of destiny, the sound of divine timing, and the vibration of a shift that has already begun in realms you cannot see. Michael says the reason heaven called this your final wake-up call is because the blessing assigned to you is already moving in your direction, and heaven cannot allow it to arrive in an atmosphere of confusion or hesitation. He says this is not just a blessing. This is a transfer. And transfers only occur when the appointed vessel is ready, awake, and positioned. He reveals that your life has gone through a spiritual narrowing. The distractions, the delays, the emotional entanglements, the sudden endings, and the internal restlessness were all part of heaven's strategy to pull you into alignment. You may have felt like you were losing pieces of your life, but heaven was removing anything that could not hold the weight of your next chapter. Michael says the blessing coming to you is too valuable to be released into chaos. Heaven had to refine your surroundings before the blessing could safely land. Even the silence you experienced was part of the process. When heaven removes noise, it is preparing to speak clearly. Michael shows me that you have been living in a space between identity and assignment. The person you used to be cannot hold the blessing you are stepping into, and the person you are becoming cannot stay in the environments you have outgrown. This internal shift has caused moments of confusion, but heaven calls it transformation. You have been shedding layers you no longer need. Old beliefs, old fears, and old expectations have been peeling away like bark from a tree that is outgrowing its shell. Michael says this shedding is not pain, it is preparation. Heaven never elevates someone without first reassigning their inner world. There is something heaven wants you to understand more deeply. The signs you ignored were not warnings of danger. They were invitations to clarity. When you felt discomfort around certain people, it was heaven saying, your spirit no longer belongs here. When opportunities dissolved unexpectedly, it was heaven saying, this path is too small for your calling. When your intuition cried out in moments where your mind felt uncertain, it was heaven saying, pay attention. This matters. But now, Michael says your spiritual hearing has opened. You are no longer clouded by the same influences that once distracted you. Heaven is speaking, and you are listening. That alone is evidence that you are ready for the blessing to be transferred. Michael reveals that the transfer coming your way includes several layers. It carries new opportunities, new clarity, new favor, and new strength. But it also includes a divine exchange. What was taken from you will be returned in a form that exceeds what you lost. What was delayed will accelerate. What was unclear will become unmistakable. What was blocked will flow freely. Heaven has been orchestrating every detail to ensure that when the blessing arrives, your hands will be steady enough to hold it, and your spirit strong enough to sustain it. He says there is one more truth you must receive before the blessing begins to manifest. Heaven is about to expose something that has been lingering around your life for far too long. Something that has influenced your decisions, drained your energy, or dimmed your confidence without you realizing it. This exposure is not meant to shame you. It is meant to free you. The blessing cannot fully transfer until truth is revealed, and heaven is preparing to shine light into a place you have avoided confronting. Michael says this truth will not break you. It will liberate you. And when the truth is revealed, the blessing will move swiftly, effortlessly, and powerfully. Heaven also wants to remind you that elevation requires courage. The next chapter of your life will not look like anything you've lived before. The blessing will expand your territory, shift your relationships, and open doors you never thought you were qualified to walk through. But heaven says you are ready. Michael says, your name is being whispered in places where your feet have not yet walked. The blessing has already been approved. The transfer has already been initiated. All that remains is your agreement. Before this holy shift continues, Michael urges you to stay connected. What comes next in this message carries the key to understanding the exact moment the blessing will move and how heaven will confirm it in your spirit. Stay here. You not drift. You are standing in the doorway of revelation. Type I receive the transfer in the comments if this message speaks to your spirit. Blessing code 1188. is being activated over your life. Now take a moment to like this video, share it so others can awaken to their divine timing, comment to keep the message flowing, and subscribe so these revelations continue reaching you the moment heaven releases them. Beloved heart, Archangel Michael moves into this moment with a depth of authority that signals you are stepping into one of the most revealing portions of this entire message. He says the blessing that is approaching you carries a divine urgency, because it is connected to a timeline that heaven carefully aligned long before you ever knew such a transfer existed. You were never walking blindly. You were being carried, ushered, and guided through seasons that felt confusing but were actually preparing your spiritual capacity. Michael says the reason this message has unfolded layer by layer is because your spirit needed room to expand, to breathe, to absorb truth that could not be poured into you all at once. Heaven speaks differently when the blessing is close, and right now, heaven is speaking loudly. He reveals that you have been in a season of hidden refinement. People may have misunderstood you, underestimated your intentions, or misread your silence, but heaven never misread your heart. Michael says you endured battles that no one knew about. You carried weights that you did not have the words to express. You wrestled with questions you were too afraid to voice. Yet through all of this, you remained open, sensitive, searching, and hopeful even on days when hope felt distant. Heaven recorded every moment of endurance, and that endurance became the very evidence heaven used to determine that you were worthy of the blessing now moving toward you. You did not earn this blessing through perfection. You attracted it through perseverance. Michael shows me an image of your spirit standing at the edge of a cliff, not because you are about to fall, but because you are being elevated to a higher realm of clarity. In past seasons, you looked at this edge and felt fear. But now heaven wants you to see it as ascension. This edge is not danger, it is destiny. What once felt risky now feels necessary. What once felt uncertain now feels inevitable. Michael says the signs that once confused you will now guide you with precision, because your spiritual hearing is opening in a way that cannot be reversed. Heaven has also been clearing out the emotional residue that kept you circling old patterns. You have been shedding the fear of disappointing others, the fear of losing people, the fear of stepping into realms where you feel unqualified. But Michael says heaven qualifies those who are chosen, and you were chosen long before you ever questioned your worth. You stood in seasons where you were pouring into others, while no one was pouring into you, and heaven has counted every unseen seed you planted. These seeds, sown in silence, have formed the groundswell that your blessing now rises from. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was overlooked. Nothing was ignored. Michael says there is a truth you must accept now. The blessing that is being transferred to you requires you to step out of who you were and into who you truly are. Heaven has been calling you beyond your comfort, beyond your previous level, beyond the limitations others placed on you, and even beyond the limitations you placed on yourself. This is why heaven intensified the wake-up call. Your potential is awakening, and once potential awakens, comfort loses its power. Every sign heaven sent was meant to pull you forward, not push you down. He reveals that heaven is preparing a divine confirmation for you. It will be something specific, something undeniable, something that aligns perfectly with the message you are receiving here. You have been praying for a sign that cannot be misunderstood, and Michael says heaven has already prepared it. It will come in a moment of quiet or a moment of stillness, and when it appears, your heart will recognize it instantly. This confirmation will serve as the final indicator that the blessing has been released from heaven's hand and is on its way to yours. Michael also says the next portion of this message will reveal why heaven guarded you so fiercely, why certain connections were severed without warning, and why some opportunities never open. Heaven was removing anything that could corrupt or contaminate the blessing you were chosen to carry. This blessing is not only for you, it is for the generations that follow you. When this transfer occurs, it will not simply change your circumstances. It will change your atmosphere, your relationships, your identity, and your spiritual authority. Heaven does not play with something this powerful, and neither should you. Take a breath and anchor your spirit. What comes next will take you into the heart of heaven's strategy, and everything will finally make sense. Type "I stand in alignment" in the comments if you receive this word. Blessing node 1333 is flowing over you now. Beloved soul, Archangel Michael now steps into this moment with a clarity so sharp that it feels like a light piercing through places inside you that have long been shut away. He says this part of the message is where the final layers of revelation begin to unfold, the part where heaven does not speak in symbols or hints, but in unmistakable truth. You have come through the warnings, the awakenings, the internal shifts, and the spiritual recalibrations, and now heaven is ready to unveil why this blessing carries such urgency, why this transfer was written into your destiny long before you were even aware of it. Michael says, you are not merely receiving a blessing. You are stepping into a calling. And heaven cannot allow you to enter your calling unprepared, unaware, or entangled with anything that could dilute what has been appointed to your life. He reveals that there has been a spiritual surveillance around you for quite some time. Not surveillance to condemn you, but to ensure that the environments you were in did not contaminate the purity of what heaven had been preparing. Heaven has been watching how your heart responds under pressure, how you choose kindness, even when you are misunderstood, how you continue to hope, even when disappointment tries to bury your spirit. Every time you felt overlooked, heaven saw you. Every time you felt forgotten, heaven held you. Every time you felt silenced, heaven recorded your faithfulness. Michael says this transfer is not happening because of luck, chance, or coincidence. It is happening because heaven saw that even when you were weary, you did not surrender to darkness. Even when you were discouraged, you did not let bitterness take root. Even when you felt broken, your spirit kept whispering, there must be more. Heaven responds to whispers like that. Michael shows me that your life has been on a trajectory that appeared slow to the natural eye, but in the spirit, heaven has been accelerating your growth. You thought your progress was stagnant, but heaven was working beneath the surface, strengthening foundations you didn't even realize needed reinforcement. He says the blessing that is coming is not a small shift. It is a structural change. It will alter the direction of your life the same way a river changes course after a storm. This is why heaven needed your foundation firm and your vision clear. The weight of this transfer would have crushed the older version of you, but the version of you standing here now, the awakened, refined, sharpened you, is ready. Heaven is also revealing something important about timing. Michael says you are stepping into a moment where the veil between heaven and earth is thinner for you than it has been in years. That is why your intuition feels heightened, why your dreams feel meaningful, why your emotions feel deeper, why signs seem to appear around you with unusual consistency. Heaven is not repeating itself. Heaven is synchronizing you. When the blessing arrives, you will recognize it instantly, because your spirit is being tuned to the frequency of what is coming. Michael wants you to trust your sensitivity. The very things you once dismissed as coincidence were actually the language of heaven. He also says there was a specific moment in your past, a moment of heartbreak, loss, disappointment, or betrayal, where you felt something in your life rupture. That rupture was painful, but heaven is showing now that it was also a spiritual pivot. What you thought was breaking you was actually redirecting you toward the blessing that is on its way. Heaven will always allow temporary discomfort to prevent permanent misalignment. Michael says if that moment had not happened, you would not be standing in position for the blessing that is now approaching. Heaven did not cause your pain, but heaven absolutely repurposed it. Another revelation comes through strongly now. Heaven has been protecting you from seeing certain truths too early, because they would have overwhelmed you. You were not ready to understand why people behaved the way they did, why opportunities dissolved, why certain things ended without explanation. But Michael says you are ready now. Heaven is preparing to reveal the true motives behind certain individuals, the real reason certain doors closed, and the deeper purpose behind specific delays. This revelation is coming not to hurt you, but to release you. Once the truth is revealed, the emotional and spiritual ties that held you back will lose all their power. You will not be confused. You will not be shaken. You will not mourn what heaven removes. You will walk forward with clarity so strong that your spirit will feel lighter than it has in years. Michael says the next portion of this message will uncover the heart of heaven's urgency. The blessing is close, incredibly close, but heaven wants your understanding to be complete before the transfer takes place. You are about to learn what heaven has been guarding on your behalf, what has been written in the high places, and what is about to manifest in your life with undeniable force. Stay present, beloved. Do not drift. Do not rush. Heaven is preparing to reveal the truth that ties all the previous parts together. If this speaks to your spirit, type "I am ready for full revelation" in the comments. Blessing code 1414 is circling your life right now. Beloved soul, Archangel Michael steps into this moment with a stillness that carries more power than thunder, more authority than any earthly voice, and more clarity than anything you have heard so far. He says you have now entered the portion of this message where heaven speaks plainly, directly, and without metaphor, because you are ready to receive truth without dilution. Everything before this moment was preparation, the awakening, the alignment, the separation, the sharpening, the unveiling. But now heaven reveals the reason this was called your final wake-up call, the reason this blessing carries urgency, and the reason your spirit has been stirred in ways you cannot explain. Michael says, a shift has already been written in your timeline, and heaven is preparing to deliver what was preserved for you. The blessing is no longer waiting to be released. The blessing is now waiting for you to stand fully in the identity heaven has been molding within you. Michael reveals that for a long time, you were living beneath your spiritual capacity. You were functioning in a version of yourself that was shaped more by survival than destiny. You learned how to endure, how to push through pain, how to navigate uncertainty, how to keep going even when you felt drained. But heaven did not create you just to survive. Heaven created you to carry influence, purpose, clarity, and authority. The blessing coming your way is not simply a gift, it is a mantle. A mantle requires maturity, discernment, and obedience. That is why heaven delayed certain things until your spirit was strong enough to hold what is being transferred. You thought heaven was denying you, but heaven was developing you. Heaven has also been monitoring something around you, an environment, a relationship, a pattern, or a mindset that once had the power to distort your clarity. This influence may have seemed small or harmless in the natural world, but spiritually, it was draining you, slowing you, or blinding you to divine signs. Michael says heaven waited until this influence lost its grip on your life before activating the blessing. Now, because the interference has weakened, the blessing can approach without obstruction. You may not fully see it yet, but something has already broken off of your life, a heaviness, a confusion, a cycle, or an emotional attachment. Heaven removed it quietly, but the liberation you are feeling now is the first sign that the blessing has been released. Michael shows me an image of 3 layers, what was, what is, and what is coming. You have already stepped out of what was. You are standing in the doorway of what is. And the next step you take will lead you into what is coming. The life heaven intended for you, not the life you settled for in past seasons. The signs you ignored in earlier chapters were heaven trying to redirect you toward this moment. But now that you are awakened, heaven no longer speaks in subtlety. Heaven speaks in clarity. Michael says, your spirit is finally tuned to hear heaven without interference. He wants you to understand something essential. The blessing that is coming is specifically designed to replace what you lost, restore what was broken, and elevate what was overlooked. This is not compensation. This is divine alignment. Heaven is giving you what has been held in reserve for your destiny. There were moments in your past when something slipped away from your hands. Opportunities, connections, resources, dreams, and you wondered if it was gone forever. Michael says those losses were not endings. They were exchanges. Heaven took what was unstable so it could return something secure. Heaven took what was temporary so it could return something lasting. Heaven took what was small so it could return something greater. This blessing is heaven's response to everything you endured in silence. Michael also reveals that heaven is about to give you a moment of confirmation. A moment so precise, so personal, and so unmistakable that you will know instantly that this message is not imagination or coincidence. This confirmation will arrive in a way that speaks directly to your spirit's deepest question. Heaven will answer what you have been wondering. Heaven will illuminate what you have been unsure about. Heaven will guide you toward the exact step you must take next. This is not guesswork. This is divine instruction. Heaven wants you to prepare, because once the blessing begins to manifest, your environment will shift quickly. People will begin to see you differently. Some will be drawn to your light. Others will be removed because their intentions cannot withstand the purity of what heaven is placing on your life. This is why heaven prepared you through separation. This is why heaven strengthened your discernment. This is why heaven awakened your intuition. You are walking into a chapter where your alignment determines your elevation. Michael says the next part of this message will be the culmination, the moment heaven reveals the full purpose of this blessing and the exact spiritual significance behind the transfer. The final revelation will not just explain the blessing, it will mark the moment your spirit steps into full readiness. Stay grounded. Stay attentive. Stay open. Everything you have walked through spiritually has been leading to what comes next. If this resonates in your spirit, type "I'm ready" for what heaven wrote in the comments. Blessing code 1616 is moving over your life right now. Beloved soul, Archangel Michael steps forward with a presence that feels like the final turning of a great spiritual wheel. The moment when everything that was circling, waiting, gathering, and aligning finally arrives at its destined point of release. He says this part of the message is not simply a conclusion. It is a coronation. Heaven has walked you through awakening, separation, refinement, clarity, exposure, and realignment because your spirit needed to reach the point where you could receive what was meant for you since the beginning. Michael says, this is the hour when heaven hands you what was preserved, protected, and prepared in the high places. The blessing is no longer in motion. The blessing is now at the brink of manifestation. Heaven simply needed you to be fully present, fully aware, and fully awakened before the transfer could occur. Michael reveals that the reason heaven called this your final wake-up call is because the spiritual window for this blessing is open right now. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but literally in the unseen realm. He says the timing of your obedience, the timing of your understanding, and the timing of your awakening all intersected in this exact season. This is why your spirit has been feeling weight, pressure, anticipation, and even restlessness. Your body has felt it. Your emotions have felt it. Your intuition has felt it. Something has been shifting inside you because heaven has been preparing your inner world for an outer breakthrough. The signs, the nudges, the discomforts, the sudden clarity, all of it was heaven positioning you into a posture of spiritual readiness. You may not have realized it, but you have been walking toward this divine intersection for years. Heaven wants you to understand that your blessing is not arriving alone. It is arriving with instruction, with empowerment, with clarity, and with divine direction. This is not the kind of blessing that enters your life quietly. It is the kind that reintroduces you to yourself. Michael says your identity will expand because the blessing carries new responsibility. Your discernment will sharpen because the blessing carries new opportunity. Your spirit will strengthen because the blessing carries new territory. You will not be who you were after this transfer, because heaven never elevates someone without transforming them. This transformation is already happening within you, and the signs you have sensed internally are the evidence that the blessing is nearing manifestation. Michael shows me an image of a scroll being unrolled in heaven. On the scroll is your name, written in radiant light, and beneath your name is a list of promises, things heaven declared over your life, long before you faced the battles that tried to break you. Some of these promises were delayed because you were not yet in alignment. Some were delayed because heaven had to protect you from environments and people who were not prepared for your elevation. Some were delayed because heaven needed to strengthen your character before giving you access to power. But nothing was denied. Every promise remained intact, sealed, and untouched. Michael says heaven has now given the command for these promises to activate. He speaks with certainty. What was held back is now being released. What was withstanding interference is now breaking through. What was waiting is now arriving. Heaven is also revealing that this transfer will mark the end of several cycles in your life. Cycles of uncertainty. Cycles of delays. Cycles of emotional heaviness. Cycles of spiritual confusion. Cycles of misplaced loyalty. You have been walking out of these cycles slowly, but this blessing will break them fully. It will finalize your exit from old energies and propel you into the new chapter heaven has written for you. Michael says this transfer is not only a beginning, it is an ending. An ending of everything that tried to convince you that you were not chosen, not worthy, or not ready. Heaven is rewriting your internal narrative, restoring your confidence, strengthening your spirit, and renewing your hope for. Michael wants you to know that this blessing will not slip away from you. It will not be reassigned. It will not be delayed again. Heaven has witnessed your awakening, and heaven has decided that you are ready. What comes next in your life will feel like clarity rushing in after years of fog. You will know where to stand. You will know what to release. You will know who belongs with you and who does not. You will know which opportunities carry heaven's signature and which ones are distractions. The blessing comes with guidance, and heaven will not leave you guessing. Everything you have walked through spiritually has brought you to this final moment, the moment where the transfer begins. Michael's final words over this message carry the full weight of heaven's intention. Stand in readiness. Stand in purity. Stand in obedience. What heaven has been preparing is now moving into your life. The blessing is yours. The transfer is yours. The moment is now. Before you receive what comes next, take a breath. Let your spirit absorb the magnitude of this moment. You are standing in the exact place heaven needed you to stand for the blessing to find you. If this resonates deeply, type "I claim the transfer" in the comments. Blessing code 2024 is being unlocked over you now.